lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slang, an It Slays podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we're going to be discussing Until Dawn, which was released April 25th, 2025, exclusively in theaters. So, Rowan, I want to know, are you a fan of the video game this movie is based on? Are you familiar with David F. Sandberg's work? And by extension, were you looking forward to the Until Dawn movie?
All right, so many questions here. Video game. Yes, this is like one of my all-time favorite video games. So
nice.
Obviously, I felt like I was going to feel the pain of everyone that gets a video game adaptation of their favorite video game. And then, you know, you're like, oh, I know everyone in the world's been disappointed about every adaptation ever. But yeah, I mean, I love this game. I remember I came to it late. I came to it like a couple years ago. I remember crushing this like in like one day, one night. I just had my curtains pulled. I didn't sleep. Headphones on, just fully immersed, just going in. And this kind of got me hooked on these kind of horror games of like choices. Obviously, you know, after this, the Dark Pictures anthology spawned off this.
Have you checked out The Quarry? It's also by them,
I haven't yet. I've got it downloaded.
Okay.
My video game days are so rough right now. Trying to find time to play. I'm still on like Little Ashes, I think, or whatever.
Little Ashes? Little Nightmares?
No, I think it's called Little Ashes. It's one of the Dark Picture anthology ones.
House of Ashes.
House of Ashes, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that shows you how like I haven't played it in like months.
Little Hope. House of Ashes. So if it's the one that's set during like the Iraq War, I'm pretty sure that's House of Ashes. If it's Little Hope, I think that's like the
Ghost Town,
the witch trials.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one I'm on.
Okay.
So I do got to get back to playing that. And then I guess on a sidebar, I'm fairly big fan of like Larry Fessenden, who obviously is like a kind of iconic independent horror maker, but helped create Until Dawn and write it and stuff.
Yeah, I didn't mention him in the opening just because I find a lot of his work, it just tends to be Wendigo centric media, more or less.
He loves Wendigos.
Oh yeah, he's a big fan.
So yeah, that was about the video game, and I can't. What the hell were the other questions?
David F. Sandberg. I don't know if you're familiar with his work or not. Obviously, he had his come up on YouTube with a bunch of short films and whatnot.
Yeah, so I'm probably no one best. Obviously, most people, I guess, would say Shazam. And
exactly.
I was, you know, before we had Buddy, you know, Mr. Shazam himself kind of just go nuts, go full out crazy alt-right. I thought
Zachary Levi, not David F. Sandberg. Yeah.
No, Zachary Levi. I was a fairly big fan of Shazam. Like I thought the first one was pretty good.
I agree
for the tone. The second one was god awful.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about horror. Lights Out. I don't think I've ever actually finished Lights Out. I watched Lights Out one time, like maybe like 5 years ago by myself, and like after 10 minutes, I was like, nope, not tonight. Because I don't know why. I was like, man, this is too scary for me right now.
Oh wow, okay. I wasn't sure which way you were going there. If it was too boring or if it was too scary.
No, the lights on off thing that gets me every time in any horror movie. So I've never seen the short it's based off of. I should
also
watch
really
it.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a proof of concept. I think it's just him and his wife. They shot it in their apartment at the time. And I don't know, it's probably 2 minutes long. But essentially, it's around the whole core conceit of turning the lights on and off in the hallway leading to their bedroom, I believe. And then it just ends in a jump scare with her turning the lights off to go to bed for the night. But yeah, it's a great proof of concept. I completely understand how somebody with some pull in Hollywood saw it and was like, this would make a great feature. Lights Out, you know, we don't have to talk about it too much, but obviously I would say the short as a whole is probably better than the movie, just because the movie winds up getting into this territory of trying to explain what is this entity behind this phenomena, which is kind of silly.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess, does that make me like, I guess like a fairly positive on David Sandberg?
Have you seen Annabelle Creation?
So I haven't. I've only seen the first Annabelle.
Okay. It's terrible, to be fair. The first Annabelle is absolutely terrible. In my mind, I remember Annabelle Creation being significantly better.
That's the one everyone likes, right?
Yeah. But when I searched it up on my Letterboxd, I still only gave it like middling reviews.
I mean, I feel like that's positive for the Conjuring universe, maybe. So
well, I like Conjuring 1 and 2. The rest of it does not fill me with hope. But in my head, I remembered enjoying Annabelle Creation, even if my Letterboxd review might not say so.
But what about you? Let's turn it back on you.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Until Dawn series, and obviously Supermassive Games that they went and did the Dark Pictures anthology. I think a lot of those are kind of middling, or they got a cool idea, but it's not as good as Until Dawn. I platinumed that game back in the day, so I had to beat it. I don't know, probably 4 or 5 times on luck. At the time, I think they advertised that it had like 200 endings, but in reality, it had probably 4 to 5 different endings. So I beat it however many times you needed to kind of 100% it and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I did the same thing with The Quarry a few years ago as well, which I think had 9 different endings. So anyways, I'm very familiar with this kind of interactive horror games in the style of Until Dawn, where essentially there's a bunch of quick time events. Your characters can die pretty much at any point in time after probably the first couple of hours. And I'm a big fan of what they've done. And Until Dawn, I think, is a pretty formative game in that vein. Before that, it was probably only really Heavy Rain that was doing that sort of thing before. So, and also just for me, it was my introduction to wendigos as like a creature or as a concept. And it was also a winter horror, which I love winter horror. I like the idea of Wendigo, even though I would say they're pretty overexposed in the last probably 5 years in horror. But yeah, it was the sort of thing where one of my first screenplays I ever wrote just on my own, it was centered around a Wendigo. It was a Wendigo story kind of in Labrador sent against a caribou hunting trip. So heavily inspired by Until Dawn. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the original game. Now, with this one, was I looking forward to it? We probably discussed it on the Look Ahead episode we did a couple months back, but there was some reporting probably about 5 to 6 months ago that this wasn't going to be an adaptation of the actual Until Dawn game, that it was going to be this time loop movie where essentially every night they would have a new horror villain or be, dipping their feet into a different horror genre, and that was just like not at all interesting to me. I understand how it might work as a video game, or I understand even as like an anthology series or something, but as a movie, it wasn't really something that I was looking forward to. With that said, I do like David F. Sandberg kind of just as a YouTube creator, or what I'd call kind of like a force for good in the horror industry. He's somebody who really enjoys like practical effects and also kind of demystifying the art of filmmaking on his YouTube channel. He has loads of behind the scenes videos or tutorials, and even though he's a working director in Hollywood, he still goes ahead and makes these little short films over the course of a weekend with his wife, semi-regularly. So it's just one of these guys who I believe deep down is trying to make good movies and actually is passionate about filmmaking and also like fostering the joy of filmmaking or like pushing the art form forward. It's just, every now and then somebody like this might still churn out a stinker, as we saw with Shazam! Fury of the Gods. So it's the sort of thing where if I have negatives to say about this movie, it's not directed at David F. Sandberg. I think the guy is largely great from what I've seen online. It's just, we're rating the movie at the end of the day. So yeah, cautiously optimistic, kind of praying that this movie was going to be very good. But yeah, that's kind of where I was sitting at before we got into the theater. So should you wait until this one is on streaming? Well, before we get into that, let's throw it on over to the trailer.
Is that? Every time we die, the night restarts, and something new is trying to kill us.
Nobody's made it past 13 nights.
The only way out is to make it until dawn.
Don't move. Until Dawn. Exclusively in theaters April 25th.
Until Dawn was directed by David F. Sandberg and written by Blair Butler and Gary Doberman. And the story is as follows. 1 year after her sister disappeared, Clover and her friends head to the remote valley where she vanished in search for answers. Exploring an abandoned visitor center, they soon encounter a masked killer who murders them one by one. However, when they mysteriously wake up at the beginning of the same night, they're forced to relive the terror over and over again unless they can survive until dawn. Now, Rowan, here on Now Slaying, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So what are your thoughts, or your spoiler-free thoughts, on Until Dawn?
Well, I guess I can start by saying, boy, wish I read that article beforehand, because I didn't know that they were going to
you didn't know it was a time loop movie.
So that was the first thing that kind of like threw me off. Was I was like, oh
no,
wait a second. I was like, I don't remember this in the Until Dawn games. What conceit is going on here? But other than that, once I adjusted with this, I feel like people would probably expect me to come in like pretty negative on this. But I will say, I actually enjoyed the casting of this. I thought it was pretty good. Some people, I guess, in the last couple of years that, we've seen. I thought Odessa Izon was, or Azion, or however she says her last name.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I think this may be the only thing I've seen her in.
So I saw her and she was the main lead in the Hellraiser reboot.
Okay. I still haven't seen that.
She was pretty good in that. I really enjoyed her in that. So it was cool to see her in that. And I recognize Ella Rubin just because I was one of the people that watched that weird Anne Hathaway romantic comedy on Amazon Prime that she was a co-star in.
The Idea of You?
Yeah,
or a different one?
The Idea of You. Why I did that, I'm not 100% sure. But
haven't seen that. Apparently she has a bit role in Anora as well, but I mean,
yeah,
it can't be anything that's, that large or I'd remember it.
But I thought it was kind of funny, and I kind of want to tie it into, like, when I'm sitting down watching the trailers, like, what's coming out and stuff. Obviously, I think, like, the big trailer in front of this was I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah.
That's coming out, whatever they want to call it. I guess it's not really a reboot.
Requel?
A requel? Yeah, is that going the Scream route? But, I was kind of thinking that this, to me, really kind of works in the vein of that, of like I Know What You Did Last Summer, like these kind of films. It really gave me almost a 90s feel. Like, it's just kind of like a teen horror. It's based, obviously nowadays we got to base it on some sort of IP to get people's butts in the seats. But, like, I don't know. This was a movie I thought, like, the practical effects were pretty good. It was far gorier than I thought it was going to be, especially where it was only like a 14. I think maybe I've been scarred, like... when I went and had to go see like Tarot last year and all this stuff. And then I'm like, boy, this is rough. We're rough out here for like teen horror movies. And, like I said, I went in, I didn't know that they weren't going to base this, off the premise of like, well, I mean, what is it? Just a movie, really? A character's actions affecting another character's actions. I think that's just called a movie. But yeah, I didn't know about this time loop thing. And
yeah, from what I understand, they were trying to bring in kind of that choice-based aspect to the movie. But of course, I don't know if that sort of mantra or that sort of methodology really works in the course of a movie, because none of us have any say on what the movie's playing at. This isn't Bandersnatch on Netflix. So I understand you're getting to see these characters die off in a bunch of different ways and learn and basically try and survive. But it is a pretty strange choice, I think, at the end of the day, to go in this direction rather than not adapting the source material. Yeah, well,
there was a lot of just like... I guess if I really wanted to be like there was just odd, obviously, like you said, I think a big selling point of the game is it's like a really good winter horror game. They opted not to do a winter horror. Obviously they kind of blew out the kind of core story of Until Dawn. It did a lot of changes. I mean, really... This is almost unrecognizable to me, other than the title. This almost really seems to me like they had bits and parts of like other ideas, and then they were like, how can we work it into this video game adaptation that we're supposed to do?
I agree.
But I don't necessarily think it's a negative, other than using the IP name and the IP for the promotion. Because honestly, like I thought overall, like some of the jump scares worked on me. Like I said, I thought some of the gore and the effects were really well done. This kind of, I brought up Tarot earlier, and I guess I was thinking, that was probably the last kind of marketed to like preteen, teen horror I could think of that's like in very similar vein of this, where there's like different monsters, and I just thought this kind of utilized that better, where I thought the ideas were a little more fleshed out than that. Like I said, I just thought the scares worked a little better, and I think David F. Sandberg kind of gets the idea of it's kind of got to be gory. And I think that's one of the things that studios kind of make a mistake with teen horror, is they go too far, not to like a hard 14 rating. And I thought overall, like this just kind of, I just don't know how you can get that mad at it, I guess. I was like, I don't know. I just wasn't offended that much. And I guess if you get me on a couple jump scares, I was somewhat okay with it. Like, I'm just blabbing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was offended by this.
Were you?
Yes, absolutely. It is rated R in the States, but up here in Canada is 14.
We're not sissies, so.
Yeah, so it's the sort of thing where I agree. There's lots of great practical effects in this. I think David F. Sandberg made this movie because he wanted to make a big, gory, practical effects driven movie. And kind of this conceit around every night repeating, but also being of a different genre. We'll get into how successful that is a little bit later. I think it just allows them to kind of kill off these characters in multiple different ways, showcase different practical effects, have some fun with it. And I think that is probably the most successful aspect of the movie, just the pure, some of the practical effects are good. Now, are some of these effects completely overused to the point of that I just think they don't really have much of an effect anymore? Absolutely. There's one very explosive effect in the movie that if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I think it's kind of just used, 6 or 7 times. Some of it's to comedic effect, but it also just gets a little bit exhausting the longer the movie goes on. This time loop premise, I do like it as a pitch. I just hate it for Until Dawn. Yeah. And I also think how this movie was set up in terms of it's going to be a new horror movie every night. It's going to be vastly different. It really isn't. Like, don't get me wrong. There are different forces, and I'm treading carefully because I don't want to spoil anything. But stylistically, the movie doesn't look vastly different from one night to the other. It's still, we're going to be in this visitor center. It's still going to be very dimly lit. The color grading and everything's going to be the same. It's not like one night we're in a slasher, Friday the 13th movie, and the next night we're in a James Wan crazy, blue and red lit thing, and the next time we're in a giallo, and the time after that we're in like an animated horror thing, or it doesn't really get weird with it. It always just looks stylistically consistent with a small modifier of, okay, well, maybe it's not a masked killer this time. Maybe it's a possession, an entity that's possessing people, something to that effect. So I was disappointed on that level where it didn't feel like a genuinely different horror movie to me each night. Like, it didn't go from like Evil Dead to Rosemary's Baby or something, right? It was kind of always internally consistent or stylistically consistent. What I'd say is, for me, I just wound up getting bored by this. I would say by the third loop of the movie, which is probably, 30 to 40 minutes in, I was so bored. It was the sort of thing where I was like, I'm not really vibing with these characters. Some of them are fine, but none of them are as good as the characters in Until Dawn, which are caricatures themselves. So if these original characters can't even get up to the level of the Until Dawn caricatures, that doesn't really bode well for me caring too much about your characters. And I would say the movie even gets tired of its core conceit. We're told early on in the movie that there's going to be essentially 13 loops, or, at least you can read the names in kind of this book, which is kind of tracking how many loops they've done. And it's the sort of thing where I was waiting for the moment to show us all these different wild, wacky horror things. But essentially the movie does X amount of loops, gets bored, and then skips through, 6 to 7 different loops off camera. And then it's basically like, all right, guys, time to wrap it up, which I just think is like an incredible disservice to the movie. Like, if you think about these time loop movies, like Happy Death Day,
Yeah.
you see her relive these loops multiple times where she's kind of getting her confidence. She's kind of being snarky. She's trying a bunch of different ways to survive, but also there's this, a lot of the horror isn't scary anymore. And to be fair, there is an extra wrinkle here where they believe they have a finite amount of loops to solve this in this movie. But I feel like we didn't really make good on the time loop fun of multiple different horror genres over the course of one night. We didn't make good on an Until Dawn adaptation. And for me, it's just, as a slasher or a teen horror, I was just left wanting more as well. So for me, I was largely just bored silly by this, I would say, after a certain point. There are a couple of references to Until Dawn, or a couple of things that are like, okay, this is clearly they pulled a character or a creature or some aspect and lifted it directly from the video game and put it in the movie. But they are very much passing references. They're not integral, more or less, to the story. I mean, that might not be fair because there are parts of the story that are integral that obviously are also present in Until Dawn, but the way they're presented or the way that they're shown is certainly not the way it's done in Until Dawn, where I just cared so much about these caricatures, and obviously the core Wendigo story from that game that, I was left very disappointed by this.
Well, I think too, you're kind of hitting the nail on the head with I did find that like they're pulling this stuff out of the game. But I find even when they're trying to be like, we're going to pull something directly out of the game, put it in so you can go, yeah. It's like they had to change just like a little something just so it's like, oh, well, this is our thing. This is like the movie's thing, where this is like, really a case. Especially, I mean, like we've said about the game Until Dawn, like the story in Until Dawn is very good. Like, I love the story of Until Dawn. I'm like, you didn't even really need to change that much. Just put it on the screen, where it was just like, we're going to change things, or either majorly or minorly enough to annoy you as a fan of the game, of like a change that doesn't really matter, but you just made it anyway. And it's like I said before, it's just so much of this read to me what you said of, it's like I want to do some cool practical kills and these different genres of movies. It was just like cutting room floor scraps of ideas of movies, and then it was like, yes, let me smush them into this. And I mean, obviously we had two different reactions to that. To me, I was kind of like, whatever, don't worry, when we get to rating this, anybody listening, like, I'm not going to say this is the next Shining or the next Get Out or something. Like, you don't need to worry about that. But I think this kind of just, it's kind of like every other video game adaptation is like, This is one you got to go into and be like, they're going to bastardize everything I love.
Yeah, there's very few video game adaptations that are actually good. Like, obviously there's The Last of Us that's airing right now, which most people thoroughly enjoy. I'm a huge fan of The Last of Us, and I would say the show it's probably about 80% there in terms of what the game is. I think the game is superior in both seasons so far, but it's still the sort of thing where at least we're pretty much there. They are very faithful in that show. I think they miss a couple of the core ideas or the core things I personally love about The Last of Us, but a lot of people love the show and they think it's a faithful adaptation. I haven't seen the Fallout TV series, but apparently the Fallout show is great as well. People love the Sonic movies. I think they're okay. But by and large, it's more like Borderlands and Assassin's Creeds and the Monster Hunter movie and all this garbage. This I don't know if I'd go so far to call it garbage, even though personally I don't like it very much. But going into this movie knowing it's going to be a time loop movie, for me personally, that I knew it wasn't Until Dawn, I at least expected one of these loops to be Until Dawn. Yeah. I expected, let's say, like, okay, loop 5, it's going to be straight up Until Dawn. It's going to be winter horror. They're going to be at a ski lodge. It's going to be some Wendigo shit going on. And at least it's entertaining, and it kind of like, it satisfies me as being the Until Dawn fan that I wanted to be there, because I thought these nights were going to be vastly different. I thought we'd get one night where this cabin is set, or this visitor center is on the edge of a lake, and it's clearly a Friday the 13th homage. I thought one would be set in autumn in the fall, and it's like, oh, okay, it's very clearly like a Halloween sort of horror sort of thing. I thought, oh, we're gonna poke fun at elevated horror, we're gonna poke fun at this and that, and essentially every night was gonna be vastly different, and that's just not the movie we got at all. Every loop in this movie is, okay, it's a visitor center and kind of this like arboreal valley that always looks similar. There's always a bit of rain. It's always a bit of dark. It's dark and gloomy outside. And I don't even think it's actually fair to say every single night of this movie that we live is insanely different, because there are multiple loops that are exactly same as the loops before that we'll get into in the spoiler discussion. Yeah. So it's just, for me, it's like, you didn't give me Until Dawn. You didn't give me the movie that was heavily marketed, or at least to me that I've seen them kind of discuss a lot online. So it's just, I don't know what you were doing here. And for me, my audience even didn't seem really into it. They didn't, like, people weren't leaving or anything, but it seemed like everyone was just kind of like shrugging, like, yeah, this is all right. Every now and then you get a reaction to a practical effect. You get like a snicker or a laugh, but by and large, this just isn't Until Dawn, and as a fan of that, it's not what I wanted. So yeah, it's the sort of thing I don't think I'd really recommend you rush out and see this if you're an Until Dawn fan. I guess maybe if you've seen the trailers and you think there's some fun there, or maybe you know one of these, you know, up and coming actors in the cast that I'm pretty much unfamiliar with all of them, maybe. But yeah, it's the sort of thing where it's just I'm not really sure why I would recommend this to anybody, really.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to kind of be the opposite. Like, I had an all right time at this. I do really think they should have trimmed it down to, like, 120 or something. Like, to me, because so much of it was the same, I don't know, man, like, get rid of some of the loops or something. Like we said, we're going to talk about it, but, like, there was a lot of stuff that was exactly the same, or even stuff as they're unfolding the mystery that I was like, this is ground that we already went over. Like, we've already, and, like, we're just watching them kind of discover the same things over and over again. And yeah, I thought like 150 is a little rough on the runtime for this, but I thought there was enough in this that I enjoyed my time in the theater. And I guess, yeah, like I mean, I think the heart was there. I don't think the heart was necessarily there, like you said, for the video game adaptation. I think the heart was there for what he wanted to make as a horror movie, just in general. So I'd like mildly recommend it. Honestly, I think this will do like gangbusters on streaming. This seems like a streaming movie to me, even though I'm telling you to go see it in the theater. But I feel like, this is going to be, kids are going to watch this and love this. This will be their fucking favorite horror movie, and we'll all grown in size adults.
Yeah, this is the sort of movie that I would have rented in my teenage years, and then we'd all gather around at like someone's house on a Friday or Saturday night, and we'd watch it and probably come away being like, oh, that's okay, that was fine. But Until Dawn is also one of those games that you can do that with. You could play with a crowd, you can make choices together. It could be so fun to just play through that game. So for me, it's just like, play that game if you haven't. They even like remade it a couple of years ago, and I don't think that remake is, held the very high regard, but still, I mean, Until Dawn is out there. You can just play that instead, or yeah, as you said, kind of wait for it to come out on streaming. So yeah, I'm not going to recommend you go and see this. Rowan's given a mild recommendation, and with that, I think it's time to cut to the spoiler discussion for Until Dawn. We are now in our spoiler discussion for Until Dawn, so if you've not seen Until Dawn, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, we tiptoed around a couple of different things in the spoiler-free section, mostly just of how familiar or similar a lot of these nights wind up being. But was there anything you wanted to kick off the spoiler-filled discussion with, in particular?
I think this would have worked way better especially for stuff like, obviously we have like, who I think is kind of the main villain, like the slasher guy, and not the overarching villain, but like our horror villain, that we're really using the slasher villain a lot in this.
Which this guy is directly ripped from the games, like aesthetically, the way he's styled, the way he looks. And there is even a reference to that. It might actually be Josh from the games, who was Rami Malek's character in the games. Yeah, that's a quick, like, blink and you'll miss it pamphlet on a desk at one point. But yeah, you think they should have used him more or used him less? Or
to me, and this is just, this is the Until Dawn lover in me, is I'm just like, You guys should have just kept the characters from the game. You should have, to me, it would have been way more interesting to have, like, Josh thrown into this and then this, you know, being discovered that it's him and all the things that pulls out into the story. I think it's just, like, far less interesting when it's, like, you know, it's just kind of, you know, it's just a slasher guy. Because we're getting slashers and ghosts and witches and... Like, we're getting all this stuff that...
And you say that, and that sounds fun.
But it's fun. Yeah.
We get a slasher. We get a possession/witch sort of movie, all in one. We get a virus in the water, which, to be fair, these three so far are pretty vastly different. That's the first 3 loops of the movie. Then we get the masked murderer again, /Wendigo team up. Then we get kind of a found footage montage where it shows a couple of cool ideas in it, but it is very quickly 30 seconds each one.
Yeah.
And then we get the masked murderer and the Wendigo again to wrap up the movie. So that's what I'm saying, where it's essentially, it's not even kind of this fountain of different horror references and homages and different genres, and it's just fun to kind of even bask in if you're an Until Dawn fan, because at least you're like, oh, there's some interesting stuff here. They kind of return to the same well multiple times in this movie when you really only sit through 5 or 6 loops of the entire movie, which is just, well, it seems like you shouldn't have done a time loop movie if you don't have that many ideas to do a time loop.
Or not willing to go through with all your ideas.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, and you know, some of it, like, I guess I thought, you know, when the lead, what was her name? Clover gets pulled into the, like, witch house. Like, to me, that tickled my fancy because it reminded me of Canada's Wonderland. Like, when you go for Halloween, they have a house that actually looks like just like that is, like, one of the houses. And I was like, oh, it looks like that. So, I mean, like, only me would find that, like, you know, I like, oh, this is okay. And, I mean, I think, as we keep saying, it's just, I really wish the stuff looked different because... Other than having your witch or other than having your slasher, like you said, it all looks exactly the same. And you're not even, to me, you're not even with the witch. And I guess the slasher, because we use it, the slasher guy, we use him so much. But everyone else, even the lawn forms, not the stuff being shown on the found footage film, like you're only getting a couple minutes of, like, the possession and the virus, the water and stuff. And so to me, it's like, well, you don't even really get to explore any of these ideas. It's just simply to kill the characters off and be like, hey, look at these different ways we can kill them. But to me, it would have been cool, like, you know, for the water stuff. Like, what if we filmed it like, you know, like, George A. Romero's The Crazies or something, and like
Cabin Fever or something.
Yeah, and you know, like you said, like maybe the witch stuff do like a James Wan-esque thing, and
sweeping cameras, big people getting pulled up into the air on wires and stuff. And some of these might be budgetary restrictions.
Well, yeah,
but I feel like the movie didn't actually look that low budget.
No, it looks
any point in time. I felt like there was money in this movie, and then somehow you use the money to create a time loop movie that is supposed to have different horror genres, but they all just feel the same.
Yeah, well, and you know, I was gonna say, if you could do like a trim down to this minute and our hour and 47-minute whatever. You almost had to do like what the Fear Street series did in 3 movies, like have them, it's all connected, but it's so, you know, they all look so different. I just felt like it needed some sort of personality there.
I needed that as well. I needed it to go from, okay, they all show up, they're wearing their normal clothes, this is a cabin in the woods, you know, Evil Dead sort of movie, let's start off with like that. Then we hard cut, they're all in, you know, bikinis. They're kind of like, what the hell is this movie? They're in an 80s slasher movie by a lake. That's clearly like Friday the 13th. Then we cut to like, okay, it's your Until Dawn movie now, and where they were just all in bikinis and scantily clad. Now they're all in parkas and freezing to death in this winter cabin. Then you can cut to your Halloween movie where now they're all wearing costumes and they don't know who's who, and maybe one of them's a killer. This sort of shit. That's what you needed in this movie, in my opinion, just to make good on this different horror genre a night concept, if you're not going to just adapt Until Dawn, which, to me, it's just like I still don't understand. Why didn't you adapt Until Dawn? It has enough interesting wrinkles to it to just be a straight up decent movie. Like, don't get me wrong. Obviously, it still winds up feeling like a slasher, or at least the characters in the movie feels like, you know, a teen slasher movie. But it's just, there's enough twists and turns to that movie that it'd be interesting as just its own standalone hour and 40-minute movie. I'm not even sure why they settled on this, other than David F. Sandberg maybe just wanting to do some cool practical effects.
Yeah. Although I will say, you know, a positive, it was always great seeing Peter Stormare in it. Obviously.
Yeah, who's another holdover from the game, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a couple of particular instances where this is Until Dawn. It's the mass killer being Josh from the game. It's Peter Stormare eventually going to kind of his therapist office, which I believe is pretty much a replica of the game. It's the Wendigo being there, even though they're not really 100% faithfully recreated. Like, they do the face pretty much 1-to-1, but kind of the proportions of the human body kind of distorted and stretched out isn't there. They're basically humans with just a Wendigo face for the most part, what we wind up actually seeing on screen, which for me is like, okay, we're almost there. It looks good in the face, but it just doesn't look good as how the Wendigo are in the games.
I will say the Wendigo stuff was probably like my biggest disappointment in this, simply because we live in the 2000s, so we have to change the backstory to the Wendigos, that how you turn into a Wendigo is like grief and fear and depression, and you know, I felt like this was
in this movie, you mean?
Yeah,
that it's not like
in the
consumption.
movie.
Okay. Yeah, in this movie, essentially it is the idea that being stuck in this time loop kind of consumes you, and basically it's not like an actual like voracious appetite consumption where it's literally you turn into a Wendigo because you consume human flesh because you're starving to death in the, you know, a winter log cabin or something. It winds up just being this idea of that the night or the time loop itself is consuming the humanity from you, so the ultimate goal is you turn into a Wendigo, which I thought was something that they probably didn't think about going into the movie. It felt like something they put into the third act to try and make the rest of the movie feel more like thematically resonant, like that it had more of a string, a narrative thread throughout it than it actually did. But I agree. I think it was a bad choice to do that as well. And also, if you're going to do that, have the actual battle damage from each time loop kind of hold over a little bit more. Like from time loop 1 to time loop 2, you see like, okay, one guy gets his eye gouged out, so when he comes back he has a really bad black eye, or one girl gets her face bashed against the floor, so it's kind of like she has scarring on her face.
Yeah.
They completely drop that after the first loop. Essentially everyone looks fine for the rest of the movie, which I thought at least that was a little interesting detail that if they paid attention to the entire movie, even when we did that jump from, let's say, time loop 5 to time loop 13, it would have been the sort of thing where we know that time has passed because you can visually see it on all the characters that like they look far more haggard than they did in time loop 5.
Yeah, well, it was a lot of stuff like that they just didn't really keep, because they also explain, like, you know, when they're looking at the names in the guest book, they're figuring it all out, and it's like, oh, okay, as these people go through the loop, not only are they changing, but like they're forgetting who they are. They're basically, they can't even write their names, they're just writing almost like characters of their names. And because I was like, oh, okay, so as these time loops go, like their memory's gonna start to go, and they're gonna
lose more of themselves.
Lose more of themselves. But then they don't actually, even though they explain that, they don't actually ever do that. These guys always know who each other is, fully what's going on, what they need to do. And then other than like physical transformations, I'm like, well, you know, other than that, nothing really seems to be happening to you. And like you said, the physical transformations end up after that first loop having nothing to do with how they die. So it was like, yeah, it just like, it was a lot of, I feel like, ideas that just kind of got dropped because they were like trying to fit stuff in and figure out what was going on.
Yeah, it's just a sort of baffling thing to me. We've mentioned the practical effects quite a few times. Maybe let's talk about some of the kills that stood out to you. Yeah. That eye stab was an early one where essentially, I forget what exactly gets put through his face.
It's like a piece of wood or something.
Piece of wood goes through his face, and then when he pulls it out, there's like an actual like partially stabbed eyeball on it, and there's blood gushing out of his head. It's pretty horrific. Or there's Abe getting cut in half once again in that very beginning of the movie as well. He's kind of pinned to the wall, and then essentially I think someone goes in to check if he's okay, and his top half falls off of the bottom half, and kind of like some entrails spill out. What were some other ones that stood out to you?
Yeah, I like that one. I mean, obviously, I did like the first time they drink the water and like they explode, and it's kind of done as almost a comedic beat. But like you said, I kind of lose the will of liking that, because then they just use that as a conceit on how, well, if we can't really figure out how we're going to kill these guys or end this loop, well, they can just find some water and drink it and explode, and then we don't, as writers, we don't really have to figure that out.
Yeah, and they do that on at least 2 or 3 occasions throughout the movie. They do it once to defeat Peter Stormare. They do it once as a fuck you to the Wendigos, that you're not going to kill me. And then I think they do it as like kind of like a suicide pact thing as well at one point, if I'm not mistaken. So they just kind of return to this, and this explosive, human combustion element just comes back into the movie. After seeing it already happen 4 or 5 times, we see it another 3 or 4 times, and it's just kind of, once again, it's one of these feelings when I'm watching the movie that they're just repeating some of these beats or gags or aspects from a horror movie over and over again. I will say with that specific one, I thought the way Megan went out, where her kind of stomach ballooned and then she kind of recoiled and her leg blew off first and she was dragging herself across the ground. That was pretty horrific. I'm not sure why she got such like a prolonged, elaborate kind of human combustion death, but once again, as a practical effect, like that stuff was really good.
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't even mind like the witch stuff. Obviously, we get a good little smile rip off. You got to have the creepy smiles and the laugh gas. But to me, it was also just kind of wasted, because then it almost just turns into a slasher again, where obviously Clover gets possessed, but then she just puts on a mask and she's a slasher for 2 minutes. And I was like, well, to me, I was like, I'd rather just watch like this old witch like wreak havoc, I think, for a bit.
Me too. I'd rather it turn into a PG horror movie that'd be on like Family Channel or something, the old witch who lives down the lane in this old creepy house, than it just turned into a slasher movie again. And then ultimately, the one practical effect we didn't mention is the head crush, which is really good in this movie. And I know he's kind of said that they did do like a actual practical effect of like building a skull and crushing it on camera, and obviously swapping it out with the real actor. They didn't actually kill a dude in the movie, but it does look pretty gruesome when that comes in, and the movie does linger on it for at least a couple of seconds. So you definitely get to see the head get crushed and see the aftermath of kind of all the meat and bone and viscera there on display. Yeah,
well, and see, this is what I was saying in the spoiler-free section, where I think this movie, from some people, is like gonna get a pass, is like, I think they do a good job with the gore when the gore comes. Like, for a horror movie that we're seeing in the theater, like, this is, especially in this age range, like, this is pretty gory. And I think that's gonna maybe give, where it would have more detractors, I think that might help it a little bit, where people are going to say, well, at least I got to see this like prolonged head crushing, and that'll kind of be like, the piece de resistance for the movie for some people. Yeah, and I mean, the other thing I was kind of excited about that obviously we got for like 10 seconds, 5 seconds, I thought we were going to get in some like gigantic troll territory or something going on with the
when they try and leave
with the giant Wendigo, I guess, as I read up. Is that what it was supposed to be?
Is that what it's supposed to be?
It was supposed to be a large Wendigo.
Oh my god. Well, I like that less. I liked it as a giant or a big troll, kind of like from Norse legend or something.
Yeah, and I got really excited because I think they show that in the trailer. Maybe
they do,
and I was ready. I'm like, let's get to the minute the movie started, I'm like, let's get to the time loop where there's this giant thing, because I'm totally into this. I'm ready.
But once again, that is fun as the idea of it turns into this movie where they're just trying to escape, right? Or like they get in the vehicle and they drive off, and it turns into kind of some of these traveling movies where essentially you're going around in a Jeep and you're tourists and you go around and basically you're hearing about trolls and whatnot. I think Troll Hunter is the movie that in my head I'm trying to name.
Yeah.
But essentially just have them kind of leaving and just get stepped on by the giant troll or something. Like this the sort of thing. They set up these ideas, but they don't ever really make good on it. And I think it might be because they kind of box themselves into this 13 time loop idea where there's a finite amount of loops. But even with that, I think you could have explored the loops a little bit better or had a very strict mantra of each loop is 10 minutes no matter what sort of idea, like an actual time loop. But with like a ticking clock always, that maybe you could have just had a more entertaining movie overall. I guess the last thing I want to mention is how I felt like the movie ends on a huge slap in the face. To me, as an Until Dawn fan, there's a room in this visitor center that has a bunch of monitors, and basically as our heroes escape, one of the monitors, or maybe even a couple of the monitors, change to camera angles from the Until Dawn game of this ski lodge, this manor, and the outside changes from what I remember to visually look like the manor.
Yeah.
And it is snowing and it is wintry and there's like an SUV basically pulling up in the frame that essentially all of our characters, or a lot of our characters from Until Dawn likely, are just about to like take step into the manor. And basically they're setting up the movie that a lot of people probably thought this was going to be going into the theater as the sequel to the movie we just sat through. And I just kind of wonder, why didn't they just do the fucking Until Dawn movie first? Make it successful, and then, hey, you can do your summer version of Until Dawn, or your Until Dawn set elsewhere. Why kind of have this carrot on the end of the stick to end the movie on, where it's like, all right, guys, come out and support this movie, and then we're going to give you the true Until Dawn movie that you all want.
Yeah.
Like, as a fan, it was just a huge slap in the face. I was so annoyed.
Yeah, I was the exact same. I was like, Jesus Christ. I was like, just do it. Exactly. They should have just done that first. Because I feel like if you had to just made the game, this would have, Until Dawn's a massive game. It would have had its audience. I'm sure you'd make enough money that you could then make a second one. Then you could do all this stuff. And then it wouldn't be, we wouldn't care. Whatever. We got our Until Dawn game. But I feel like now, like, I don't know. I feel I haven't looked at any of the, like, I guess, professional critics or anything. But I feel like once people start trickling in to see this, that it's not going to be great, especially if you're a fan of the game, which I would assume would mean that this probably isn't going to make like gangbusters money, but I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, I think currently, and once again, we're recording this on a Sunday of the opening weekend, it seems to have made about $18 million, where the movie was made for $15 million. So Hollywood math, they usually say about you got to make twice your budget or 2.5 times your budget to break even. So it's like halfway there by Hollywood math. So we'll see. I don't know if it'll be big enough to warrant a sequel. But back when Until Dawn was released, I remember loads of people expecting Supermassive to go on to make an Until Dawn 2, or at least Until Dawn : something, right? Like basically that Until Dawn is a very good title for this idea of just these teen horror movies where essentially the whole premise is kind of like, let's see if we can survive this one terrible night and make it into Until Dawn. That, it basically everyone was super disappointed when they announced the Dark Pictures anthology, because everybody wanted more Until Dawn, like, not with these characters or in this like wintry setting with Wendigo. They just wanted another very much this style story set elsewhere. And then eventually we did get that with The Quarry, and The Quarry was actually pretty good as well. But I just don't understand why you didn't. You could have had something here if you just did the Until Dawn game, did it well, which I believe probably would have warranted, a decent critical reception, or somewhat good at least, and would have made money. And then you could just continue to kind of have Until Dawn in the movie space as almost like this anthology horror series where every time you do one, it's just different characters set elsewhere, different genre, or maybe it is always a slasher with, teenage cast. Who knows? But it's just, I feel like the way they did it this time was just mishandled, even for like a franchise potential. Because if you're basically telling us we're going to get Until Dawn, the actual game, in the second movie, that means the second movie is going to wind up feeling quite different from the first movie even. And also a lot of the iconography from the first movie, like let's say that the specific masked killer or Peter Stormare as the therapist or the Wendigo. If you're doing Until Dawn, but without Wendigo, and you're trying to adapt that first game, that's like, once again, you're set up to fail. It's just you shouldn't even bother with it. So I don't know. It's a sort of very mishandled adaptation to me that, it's just kind of annoying at the end of the day. So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, what would you give Until Dawn?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'm going to give it an okay. My okay is probably, I feel, a higher up there, okay. I mean, it's definitely not a yay, but like I said, I wasn't offended by it. There were some fun parts in it. I had a good time watching it in the theater. This is one I can see a lot of teenagers, that maybe have no association with the game, just going to see and enjoying. Like I said, it was gory enough for me, but as a fan of the game, it's just like I can't give it any higher than an okay, because they bastardized my video game. So now I get to feel the pain of everyone else. It's like huge Resident Evil fans and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm going to give it an okay, and I'll be interested to see if it makes enough money for a sequel and what they do. Because I agree with you. I feel like they box themselves in that even a sequel, there's no way I don't think it can get better. I think it can only get worse because they've used all of the kind of iconography from the original game in this that I don't really know if you can reuse, other than the only thing I could think is that they just redo this movie with another group of teens, which I definitely don't want. So yeah, I'm going to give it just an okay. What about you, Colton?
Yeah, for me, as I mentioned already, this was a tougher sit for me. I found it just fundamentally boring from what I was seeing. The idea of, even though I knew what this movie was going to be, that it was going to be fundamentally different from Until Dawn, just this time loop scenario with different horror genres, I don't feel like they did a good job of kind of demonstrating that at all. I certainly didn't get Until Dawn in this movie, which, as a huge fan, of course, I was hoping for at least one of these time loops to be the game, or at least bear more of a resemblance to the game that I, loved a decade ago. And outside of some practical effects, and, well, honestly, that's kind of it. I think the only thing I can really praise in the movie is practical effects. So yeah, it's going to be a nay from me. I do believe that most people will probably settle on this being an okay, or at least being like, that was all right. For me, it's just as a very big fan of the Until Dawn series, where even some of that game's DNA kind of inspired me in my own artistic pursuits, just in writing and whatnot. I feel like I just have more attachment to that subject, that material, that it's the sort of thing where I can't go ahead and give this a passing grade, especially since I was so bored. It'd be different if this was truly reinventing itself every night, but basically I got more of the same, and repeating a couple loops when you only showcase 5 or 6 is not really that great in your time loop movie, especially the way that this one is supposed to play out. So yeah, it's gonna be a nay from me. And if you're not following us already, you can do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, Bluesky, a couple of others that I can't remember, TikTok. Basically, if you're on a social media, have a look. We're probably there at It Slays Podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds, Holly, Nicholas, Mark, Steven, Dan, Brian, Trevor, and James, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early, be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Now, Rowan, we never mentioned the music in this at all. I don't think there was really anything in it. So I assume none of this is going to make the playlist.
Yeah, no. So, go to the playlist for Tenebrae, stuff like that.
There we go.
Some Goblin. So you can go to Spotify and look up the It Slays Podcast horrific playlist. If you have any problems finding it, you can go to any of the social media that Colton just mentioned. Go into the bio, click the Linktree link. It'll take you directly there. We upload scores or licensed music from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. So follow it. We update it regularly and get your spooky music on, because why the hell not?
And next time on the show, I'm not sure if Clowns in a Cornfield is getting a wide release or not, but that's supposed to be releasing early May. Any idea?
I have no idea, because It's like a Shudder release, isn't it? Like Shudder
Yeah,
has something to do with it.
I think they partially funded it. Yeah. So if that gets a wide release, it'll probably be that movie. If not, Final Destination Bloodlines comes out kind of mid-May, which, you know we're going to have to cover. And with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.